All right, guys, we're back. This is episode 221, and we've got Frater O on the program this week. We had a little bit of a break, had a few guests in the past to get those guys on, but Frater O's back on the show, so welcome back, brother.
It's great to be back.
So the other night, Frater O was actually listening into the Masonic Roundtable when we talked about temperance. And he brought up a good point that going into a show like Temperance on the Roundtable, I was really skeptical of how much content we would have for that. I thought, how are we going to fill an hour and talk about how you just should make sure you're not doing the things you shouldn't be doing? But of course, it went a lot deeper than that. And the second we peeked inside and we started going through the papers, we realized there was a whole lot of stuff we needed to talk about. And there might be a few things that we kind of recap on this week's episode of this show that we might touch on some of those ideas of temperance. But Frater O and myself, I think the general idea in this talk will just be kind of talking about the lessons in the first degree and how we applied them and how to apply them, and ultimately why we need to work on that and be concerned with that more than some of the other concerns and wants that pop up in our lives Masonically. So I'll just kind of let you kick it off there, brother.
And we were just talking briefly before the show, and we see this all too often where a new Mason comes in and they get really psyched about the craft and they just want to grab onto anything. And what do is they start buying books. They start joining independent bodies, and they just start going crazy, and crazy in a good way, not insane, but just like really active. And you see them really kind of, now this is not all of them, but you see it happen, and I think this is a topic to address, is they start jumping to looking for other degree systems when a lot can be just shown in just the first 3 degrees, and how important the first degree is, and being just a melting pot. There's just so much there. And there's really like 3-fold processes, and I'm sure we'll cover the other 2 processes, the second and third degree, down the road. But the first degree really focuses on the animalistic behavior, right, of the reptilian brain or the body. Like they've mapped out the human genome, so we're 98% or 99 point something crazy percent chimpanzee, and so we're animals fundamentally. They've shown like the reptilian brain underneath, and we have all these animal behaviors, and some can call them the 7 deadly sins, or as people can call them all kinds of different topics. Growing up Christian, I can relate to the 7 deadly sins. And Masonry first degree presents an amazing system on how to gain control of that animalistic behavior. I think Thomas Vaughan, the alchemist, said it best, is that the mind is like a stagecoach, and it has 4 horses, but each horse is going in a different direction. And how do you write all 4 of those horses to go in the direction that you want? And first degree has so many amazing tools that have been presented to you to apply to yourself. Now, I'm going to turn this over to you, RJ. Like, what tools or what things have you taken away from the first degree to help just gain control of the self?
Well, being a deist, my idea of God, of course, is a little bit different than many people's ideas of God, right? So it's no secret that public installation of officers, this is kind of just a preface to anything I'm going to say this evening, is, of course, I'm never going to say anything that reveals ritual. However, if there's something that I say that sounds ritualistic, I can assure you it's because it's a public ceremony of installation of officers, and some of the wording that it's there is echoed in the ritual work. So that's that. But that we should never go have an undertaking without invoking a blessing of deity. And so as the first thing that happens within the Masonic Lodge upon your entrance is you attend a prayer. And as a deist, I'm not sitting there the typical way, say a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim might. For me, it's a very introspective moment. So the first thing that happens in the Entered Apprentice degree for me was very powerful. It was this moment where I realized I was undergoing something that was going to fundamentally change the way I think about stuff and reaffirm and sure up other ideas. And so that first tool was actually just a bit of ritual that said, hey, and of course that speaks to different people different ways, but to ask somebody to pray before something happens, you might talk to God, you might talk to Jehovah or Christ or Muhammad or Allah, whatever that might be. But for me, it was an introspective moment, and that was really intense. Of course, there are several things in the first degree. We have the working tools which are presented essentially are a 24-inch gauge and a common gavel. And, I was watching actually a special not too long ago, which had, I thought Brent S. Morris in it and two other gents. It was a 2 DVD set, and it was like The Secret World of Freemasons or something along those lines. And I had watched it before I became, or shortly after I became a Mason. And one of the things they said on that DVD was they kind of explained a little bit, and that was my first, I guess, deeper meaning to those working tools. I tend to understand them a little bit better. And they explained it, in a public forum about the 24-inch gauge and the gavel. We talk about this 24-inch gauge where that's supposed to teach us how to spend our time. Well, that's all well and good. So, okay, you have handed me a tool that shows me how, or is emblematical of showing me how to use my time better. Well, that's great. We did a paper here on the show not too long ago that talked about that. It was, if you are carving a stone and you mess up, the stone can be reshaped, but you can't get back your minute that you lost or your time. It's always that joke where, well, that's a movie I just watched and I can't have 2.5 hours of my time back. So we don't want to waste time. So that one's a little bit easier to grasp than, say, the common gavel, where we say that we use that common gavel to remind us to break our bad habits and to break and guard us against making bad decisions. And those bad decisions, whatever they are, if it was, again, you look at temperance and the definition is always just alcohol, but it's a perfect example because pretty much everybody and every adult I've ever known has had a beer before, right? So you get it. But going into some of the deeper thoughts of those kind of things is kind of the direction of the show tonight. And I think that looking at the several things that are brought up to us, not just the working tools, but the idea of course, we are going to do a show on the roundtable on the next few weeks where we talk about the 4 cardinal virtues. We might mention them here, but I'm not going to go into detail with them. But temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice are those 4 sisters who exemplify these different virtues. And it's so much to just toss at an individual where it should take you a lifetime to master those qualities. But yet we somehow have gotten to a point where the memorization of, say, a catechism has been taken as the cue to say that an individual is ready for the next degree. We've talked about it before. Fratero waited 5 years between his first and second degree. He was really trying to put those teachings in practice. Now, I'm not saying you should take 5 years, but I am saying that there should be, in some way, some measure of self-improvement before you participate and get a second degree. Now, maybe you should have to write some paper, some introspective paper, and to personally dissect yourself of what you've actually done in the time between your first and your application for a second degree. Perhaps. I don't know. There's just so much there.
There is, and if you look at the Ashlar system, what's presented, and most Masons will know between the rough and the smooth Ashlar, and you look at that and applying it to yourself. And then you realize, man, there's a lot of work that I need to do myself if I need to walk this righteous path that so many systems before, have presented. And when I say so many systems before, we've mentioned this on the show in the past on how Masonry draws from so many different systems. And it's this massive melting pot, this philosophical school. And so many people before have walked this righteous path. And you can look at, from Plato to Pythagoras to many founding fathers, from George Washington to supposedly, Greek deities to supposedly, Egyptian gods, people that really significantly have changed the course of history for the positive. They've been able to kind of attune to this, I like to refer it as a frequency, right? Because like everything's vibration, we mentioned sound. And if you look at the brain as a radio dial, and if you're able to change your vibration and change yourself internally to walk the same exact steps that so many people have walked before, before, be of that mindset. And this is the system that's showing you, okay, if you want to, follow the steps of George Washington and be a better person and focus on the greater good and changing humanity, or any presidents before, or people who've changed the course of history in Europe, then these are the steps you have to do.
Well, and then if you look at things like that, where it starts off, we have this system and everybody goes, we're brothers because we all went through the same thing. And it's true that while we went through the same thing, our individual experiences are different. But what should really, really stick out in your head is that, yes, you're all Masons. And yes, you all went through the same things, but there's that sense of almost parenthood, right? So when your parents say to you, I did this, this, and this because I wanted you to have a better childhood than I had, right? And we tend to continue that forward. And so that is still kind of personified, I think, even in a Masonic lodge, where we're giving you the experience of initiating, passing, and raising, and putting you in the same spot or that same childhood that everybody else had. But we want to make it better, and we want to make the experience richer. So when you walk in the same places as Washington or Voltaire or Franklin or any of these famous Masons who really did change the course of history, it's your duty to not only proceed on path, but it's a duty incumbent upon you to do what they did plus some. That's kind of why they were founding fathers. I mean, just the term founding itself implies that they're a foundation. And what do you do on a foundation? Can you continue to build? So you should always look at these founding members of the fraternity as that, a founding member, foundation in which to build your future moral edifice.
But I mean, not even for governmental systems. If you look at even the arts and the sciences, there's always been leaders, and usually they're Masons. And it's it's really amazing.
Oh, absolutely.
When you walk a certain path or you have a certain mindset, you attract certain things. And this gets into the New Age fuddy-duddy law of attraction, but if you get deep into the esoterics, it's totally there. And you realize that once you start knowing yourself, everything out in the macrocosm is just a reflection of what's going on internally. So life is only a mirror. So if you're projecting on inside that you're never going to be successful and you're not going to accomplish something, then sure enough, that's what you're putting out there to the great architect of the universe, or the universe, whatever you want to call it. And then it's to say, okay, this is what he's thinking, this is what he's going to get back. And if you believe something so heartedly and you're willing and you're tried and tested, which has been presented in the other degrees, and on how the subconscious works or how the system works, right there. The macrocosm and microcosm are the exact same thing. You start to walk a certain path.
You did touch on something there that I found that we may have glossed over in the past. That's why we have these conversations and new things come up and old things come up. But you said when you think about, we talked about the law of attraction just a little bit. And it's true, so the macro is the micro. It's just that reflection. Life is that reflection. And when you're thinking about the success you should have, and you're putting that out there, and you become successful, there is that kind of dualistic meaning to the great architect of the universe, right? Because as you think it is being constructed, and that's part of your duty.
In Masonry, which is great, it shows that you're a Mason, you're a builder, you're the master builder, and you are literally every single thought, every single action is building towards your future, if you like it or not. And which is great about the first degree, it shows you on how to control the self, right? Ultimately, we had an episode on this, know thyself, and controlling that self to steer it to the direction that you want to go, versus, going in a direction that could be not the greatest path, could be a dark path. But so in the first degree in Europe, it's really popular, and you'll see it on a lot of trestle boards, or, boards that a lot of lodges speak to, or you can find them online. You always see the black and white checkerboard. It's consistent. So you'll see it in a lot of lodges on the floor, and you see the dark square and the black square. And a lot of Masons and usually will talk to me, and they go, well, shouldn't it be our job to always stay on the white square? And it's always one of those discussions. It's like, absolutely not. There's balance in everything. And you have to be able to go through the dark to appreciate the light. And if you look at polarity, it's found everywhere in the universe. There's two hemispheres, there's two different limbs, majority of the organs have two inside of your body. A lot of allegories and systematic systems, in dogma, it's yang or yang, an or en soft, black or white, good or bad, positive or negative, ha or tha, the male or female, the sun or the moon. I think I've touched on a lot of those, and focusing on centering yourself in between the twos, because you can go too much into chaos or you can go too much into order, but where you really truly find solitude as an individual is by using the working tools presented to you in Masonry and centering yourself in between the two, and allowing yourself to build as a person and build this character and the zeal and the things that are presented from the lessons of the black square and the white square, and just being even keel.
And absolutely great points. The polarity issue is something that's just so amazing. I mean, we were talking before the show, we didn't get on last week or just a few days ago. Fredero and I both were like, ow, our backs hurt. I had one of those like stim packs. And this is in a case of science utilizing a polarity, right? So I had a stim pack, and if you don't know what that is, it's just like two pads and it electrifies the muscle. And so it uses that, right? It's electricity. True scientific material world way. So just in that sense, that polarity is real, and positive and negative forces react on everything. Just looking at sound and vibration, you have negative and positive dips and spikes. It's an incredible subject to explore, especially when you start to realize that the positives and negatives also have even a more intricate system within themselves, which have additional positive and negative. So it goes on infinitum. It's a really, really mind-boggling and maddening system to think about. A great book that actually Fredero recommended was the Esoteric Anatomy, and that is a thick book, but the first, there it is, yeah. So he's holding it up. It's called The Body as a Consciousness. And I actually recommended the book to a couple people over email a few weeks back when I started reading the book. And the book really talks about the positive and the negative polarity therapies that you can do to a body just by performing certain touch, pressures, sounds. Very interesting stuff. Even there was a great special on Netflix about Egypt. It's really about the matriarchal society of Egypt in the distant past. But they propose, due to the oral histories passed down from Egyptians to Egyptians, that is not a mainstream idea, that the pyramids were used for basically healing purposes through sound vibrations, positive and negative forces and stuff. It's fascinating special, and it was like a 5 or 6 part special, so check that out if you guys ever want. But